Jai Hind and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Adi Archint. Today's subject is a little interesting because I wanted to talk to you guys about Western morality, a word that we've been hearing for some time now with regards to India, especially, and its relations with Russia and the oil purchases that we've been doing. This is an interesting set of times where we find ourselves actually getting being given a certain narrative with regards to what's happening around us and our own interests. I wanted to basically take this up because this is something that I've been thinking about as a question itself. One, is Western morality the new colonialism? Something that we'll have to figure out as we go about this discussion. The reason I actually wanted to come up and discuss this particular subject is because of the factor that we are today in the world of narratives, right? A narrative war is, of course, far more dangerous and far more harmful to any country with regards to what's happening around it. The narrative war makes a country take certain decisions which may not be in its own favor and the favor of its own people. And that is something which is very interesting to me with regards to a comparison of what is happening today with colonialism. Remember the times of colonialism, and we've all probably read our history, know our history about how the entire society of India was changed by the British that were actually within India in terms of the rules that were implied on us, the system that was implied on us, the change of history that was done towards us. And that was the after effects that we still feel today of the colonial past of India. What am I saying this time? Morality. Of course, morality is a very, very interesting term that I've wanted to talk about. Morality is not personal morality, right? So we are not being, I'm not talking about personal morality as in a human morality. I'm talking about morality which is being sold to us as the right thing to do. So let's get into this discussion that I've had for you guys, and I've prepared. This is not going to be a very long talk, so I just want to put that out. But firstly, I'd request everybody please like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so that you get your notifications, and yes, of course, if you can, do help out the Dev Talks efforts. Uh, Morality. Since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, and of course, even before that, we used to get a lot of lectures from the West with regards to democracy, with regards to how religious freedoms are an issue within India, and so on and so forth. Today, we see a narrative which is being talked about with regards to morality. For example, people are saying a lot of countries, including the Ukrainian foreign minister, recently said that India has to look at this stuff from a moral angle because the money that you're paying Russia is actually being used by Russia to kill Ukrainians. And this is something which was very interesting. There were also very, very strong statements given about this particular thing. But anyways, let's get into what I have kind of prepared. So as said, the morally correct and the right side of history. I'm sure all of us remember these statements that came out. We brushed them off as Western prejudice against India, but I think they have a little more depth to these random statements that were being given across. We need to understand where the West is coming from, and we need to understand how we need to kind of interact with this and how we need to safeguard our interests. All I'm trying to do by this particular discussion is to kind of make us realize that we're in the world of narratives. Please do not believe everything or anything that comes out of anywhere for that matter. Look at it, listen to it, figure it out, see the facts, do some research, and you'll be able to get to know what is actually happening. A globalism. This is a talk that I had done with Lieutenant General PG Kamath, which tells us about the narrative or the control of the world which lies in a certain few, in the hands of a certain few, and they may or may not be in the government. So let's see where this story actually comes out. Of course, we've seen, democracy is in danger in India. We've seen these articles coming out and stuff like that. But this story got into a little bit of a head when Russia attacked Ukraine, and the Russian oil came into a question. The entire blame today in terms of Indian relations with Russia has been put across as a you know as a system of morality that India needs to think about, and of course, human rights. Human rights is a very, very interesting and important, game that everybody plays. Anyways, let's move forward and see. We time and again, Minister Jay Shankar actually did these press conferences. He put across the Indian Indian side of the story, highlighting what the Indian interests were with regards to doing what we are doing. Of course, these things were very, very, these dialogues and these discussions with Minister Jaishankar went viral within India, but the impact that it had on the collective West was not that much. At the outset, I'd like to say that the West did not appreciate the chinks in its own armor, yeah, before calling out India with regards to, a whole lot of things with in link with this Russia-Ukraine war. I'd like to take us back to April. At that time, the G7 was meeting, and the Bloomberg had reported that Germany weighs snubbing India as a G7 guest over Russia's stance. And that is very interesting to me, that these kind of statements and these kind of little notes that were coming out of on the press, and we'll discuss that as we go forward. What did we see during the month of April? We saw a flurry of foreign visits coming into India, starting from, of course, Boris Johnson came in here, Ursula von der Leyen came in here. Big announcements, of course, trade deal, this and that and the other. There was a lot of, business that was discussed during these visits, a lot of bilateral relations that were discussed during these visits. But their statements before they came here tell us on what path that they actually came to India and what did they want from India. These were some of the biggest names that I've just taken. Of course, we had a lot of foreign ministers visiting India during that time, including the Russian ones as well. So there was a little bit of a push and shove that was taking place. And of course, that has been well noted and understood by a lot of us. What was being done, in my opinion, was to kind of make India follow the righteous path of the West. And I'd like us to also remember the statement that was given by Joe Biden on saying, calling India somewhat shaky. I'm sure all of us remember this particular thing. And he also said during a video call with Prime Minister Modi that, and I quote, India's position in the world would not be enhanced by relying on Russian energy sources. So they basically were trying to tell us, listen, if you don't kind of, do this, your position may not be the same in the world. This is not something that they are telling you because it may change because of a natural, evolution of things. It will be changed because of our, influence. Statements with regards to efforts which were, spoken about, especially in the US Congress, uh, telling the Congress that, we will make all efforts possible to ensure that the Indian dependence on Russian energy and Russian defense will be slowly weaned off. And, we will work with India for this particular thing. It is something which is very important to us, and this and that and the other. This is what was actually being said. But yeah, when they would stand in India and stand with our kind of foreign minister and stuff like that, the tone would be, of course, different. But at the end of it, this is been their stated policy. Looking at the Western media, I didn't really think that the Western media would put out the Indian narrative. It doesn't suit their will. It doesn't kind of showcase them in a right this thing. But again, I'm saying that the foreign minister went out of his way. In every press conference, the question of Russian oil came across. I mean, did the world really think that from one press conference, not the world, let me just rephrase myself, did the media really think that because of a particular press conference to press conference, India's entire story will change? I mean, what is this game? Will we actually just ignore the interests of India, and actually, because we're being asked questions again and again, would we actually change the way we work? And this is something that I felt which was happening. You had this particular question of the Russian oil being asked again and again and again and again, and we see that happening even today. I mean, it's quite hypocritical. One of the things that I want to bring across very, very here, clearly here, is that Jen Psaki, who was the former speaker, for the White House, and I have a new member that has joined in. That's very nice. Thank you so much. Two of them have joined in. I think Gaurav and Yash. Thank you guys. Thank you for joining in, uh, joining into the group. Okay, coming back. So Jen Psaki had, as a matter of fact, said that. Uh, it is a choice of India on which side of history it wants to be on. And, it was said that India must be taking choices to be on the right side of history. On the right side of history. And I'd like to kind of just interject here and ask who decided what was the right side of history. This is quite rich, because for coming especially from USA, who decided to selectively sanction Russia. And a lot of people don't know that Russia is one of the largest suppliers of uranium. Uh, till very recently, the Americans were still buying the uranium from Russia. So, selective sanctioning, because if they cut off uranium, power goes down, there's that, and a whole lot of other things. So, selective sanctioning is very, very interesting to me, that uh, we have something which is just done for our own interest. Let's not damage ourselves, but let's damage Russia a little bit, which is very interesting again. Interesting again, because each one of these things combine together to make a little bit of a story, which is what I'm trying to present to you. The Indian, total exports in the year 2022, between April to October, went up by about 12.5%. It was about $263 billion. While the oil exports, and let me just again repeat myself, oil exports. Now, India is not a producer of oil that it can export. We are not Saudi Arabia or anybody in the Middle East. Oil exports went up by 70%, right? And this is very interesting, because we were importing Russian oil, we were turning it around in our refineries, and we were sending it out to Europe. Now, you could call this particular thing a bit shady, but what difference does it make? As long as we had a customer and we were making money. This oil, mind you, was going to Europe and North America. And this is the same Europe and North America who would tell us to reduce our dependence on the Russian oil. I want to kind of remind all these so-called experts from Europe and North America is that it was the reason for the balance in the oil market today. And guys, correct me if I'm wrong. Please mention in comments if you guys think I'm talking something off. The balance of the oil prices in the world today is being maintained because India is buying Russian oil. Remember, if the Russian oil is completely cut off, you've got only the Middle East to kind of supply the entire world oil, and some African nations, and of course here and there. You can imagine India's consumptions are not very small. It's very, very high. If India latches onto that, the supply is this much, the demand is that much, you're going to have oil prices shooting through the roof. And this is the balance that was maintained. I'm not saying that India did this purposefully, but this is an outcome of the entire thing. This is again an example of the so-called morality which is being sold to us, but at the back door end, you are actually trying to do a whole lot of other things. The West actually did, certain moral actions, and in words, moral actions, where ship to ship transfers would happen in the middle of the night. Ships would leave Russia. Of course, Russia needed money, so it sold. Ships would reach Russia, switch off their transponders, go somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic, and ship to ship transfers of crude oil or refined oil was done, wherein the West was actually importing a whole lot of other things. I'd like to remind everybody watching this show, and who will watch it in future, that the eastern coast of America, where New York Belt and everything like that, is actually tuned to, they've got refineries there which are tuned to actually, what do you call, clarify or refine oil coming from Venezuela. Now, Venezuelan oil and Russian oil are pretty much similar. Venezuela, of course, they stopped it, and of course, there's a huge fire there when these disagreements are coming across. Different story. Venezuelan oil was stopped, so these refineries didn't have much to do. So they started importing Russian oil, which is compatible to that, and they were using it. So this is what we were doing. We were selling the same oil in unmarked tankers to the West. That wasn't immoral, but just us buying the Russian oil for refining and giving it back to the West was immoral. I wonder what kind of a balance is that. Of course, the talks of immorality and everything like that went across towards a certain threat, where surprisingly an Indian origin deputy national security advisor of America, Dalip Singh, he came out and threatened India of consequences. He stood in our country and said, there might be consequences for you. Of course, if you guys remember, that time was the time where Katsa was kind of in play. So they were I think they were trying to remind us that this is something that could happen. Except for South Korea, United States, Sweden, and United Kingdom, the rest of the major export markets of Russia grew by above 20 to 40%, which includes which includes Japan, India, China, okay, Turkey, Spain, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, and Brazil. So everybody was trading with Russia. But the verbal barbs that were being shared across, especially towards India for actually trading and doing its own bit, was interesting, right? It gave us a certain platform that we needed to actually express ourselves on. Now, interestingly, a lot of other countries were also buying stuff from Russia, but none of them were called out on the world stage the way we were. And that is something that I want to kind of emphasize by this talk. I want to move away from Russia for a little bit, and go down to Switzerland. I think all of us would love to have a nice Swiss holiday, drinking hot chocolate around a fire, looking at these beautiful snow-covered Swiss Alps. It's got a very efficient government, calls itself neutral, but what lies behind the banks, the walls of its banks, is something which is terrible. It holds a third of the world's black money and refuses to tell any country in the world who this money belongs to. A neutral country, very efficient. This is what they do. How does it show a model Europe? And I'm not talking about European Union, I'm talking about a model Europe where the UK decides to send its asylum seekers to Rwanda. The current Home Secretary there, who's that, what's her name, Suella Beverman, wants to actually do something like that. It is interesting when you see stuff like this happening in their own countries, being called out by their own countries, and still coming back to us and telling us your society is not free. I'll come to that for in a little bit. You know, as far as refugees are concerned, which is something which I found to be very, it just stuck out like a sore thumb. When I look at refugees which were coming across into Europe from Ukraine, they were welcomed as brothers in arms, and they were given houses. People kept them in their own houses, and they were given hotels and this and that and the other. Crime rates went up in all the countries that accepted Ukrainian refugees, by the way. Please speak to someone in Germany and you'll realize what I'm talking about. Please speak to someone in Paris. Of course, there's a lot of other problems in Paris. Speak to people in Poland whose government is an ardent supporter of Ukraine but is removing Ukrainian refugee benefits at the back end, of course. But they were initially welcomed with open arms. Was that the same thing that was done to Syrian refugees or Arab refugees or people coming from Africa who were also fleeing a war zone? A question to be asked. We know the entire refugee problem. I don't want to get into it. And I know there are certain countries like Turkey that are using these refugees as a weapon. He threatens the European Union. Listen, uh, if you don't, do as I am telling you to do, I will open up this gate and the thousands of refugees will come your way. And incidentally, a lot of them are Pakistanis. So that's the irony of the whole situation. India has been called out and said that you are a autocratic democracy. यार ये चीज तो हिंदी में ही निकलेगी. नाम बनाने को इनसे सीखे यार. ठीक है, this will come out in Hindi only. To how they come up with these terms, autocratic democracy, interesting. And they talked about, you the hint is about actually India not having free and fair elections. Although I don't talk about politics, but this is not politics, this is an overall. I'm not getting into BJP Congress here. It is about ensuring the factor that our narrative is put out correctly. Here is a country calling us out, which is the US. Of course, based in the US are these beautiful think tanks and NGOs and so on and so forth, who will actually call us out and say, okay, you guys are not a free and fair country who has democratic elections. And this is based in a country whose about 40% of the population thinks that they were cheated in their own election. It takes them, what, 8 days to count votes in the midterms? Interesting. Uh, they actually think that in terms of religious freedom, they would be able to lecture us. India is a diverse country, different people. You put two people in the same room for 5 hours, they're bound to fight. There are going to be issues. They're human beings. There are going to be differences. But nah, that's something that the world will not recognize. So we will be called a religiously intolerant nation, forgetting the fact that a lot of this religious intolerance in India is actually been based upon these NGOs which are working across, converting people by the mass in this country. Mass conversions in the garb of charitable organizations. Let me not go into a certain mother and her activities during her her so-called reign in Calcutta. And this we know. This is available information. So you're doing stuff when India resists it, it becomes religiously not a religiously free country. The West ignores the blatant human rights violations that happen, in their own partners. For example, the Middle East is kind of calmed down today, but let's all remember the chop shop square in Saudi Arabia, the kind of executions that take place. But Saudi Arabia, till very recently, was an important partner. Qatar, the largest US military base outside of the United States. And people are criticizing it for not having a free opportunity for LGBT and so on and so forth. But why are you dealing with them? Remove your base, get them out. But no, that serves the national interest of the US, and that always will be forefront. We do it, there's a problem. They do it, changa hai yaar. I was talking about the media. Nobody can match the system, the setup, and the organizational values of the New York Times and the Washington Post. And I'm sure all of you guys will be able to name a lot of uh, you know lot of the things with regards to uh, more publications that are there. I'm sure BBC, I'm sure CNN, and so on and so forth. So these are just the examples. We know WAPO, certain people from India also writing a lot within WAPO. Uh, you know, these are these carry news from some of the greatest think tanks, Rand Corporation, so on and so forth. Big, huge think tanks, big, huge universities, Harvard, Stanford, and all the Fords around the place, uh, who give out these analysis about India, saying that India is not a free country in the world. This moral compass of these particular news organizations have gone to a certain point to ignore the, again, human right violations that were done and probably are still being done in Guam. Now, when you compare, now a lot of people say, those guys are terrorists. Fair enough. I don't deny that fact. But we know what exactly happened in Abu Ghraib and all those stuff, right? So let's not forget these things. Let's also not forget that it was the West that used the entire German, who's, and I'm not going to say that particular name on this channel, on this platform, who's set up right after the Second World War to benefit itself. Who was the main guy behind the rockets in America? Werner von Braun. Who was the guys who set up the entire CIA system in Eastern Europe? Very well known, right? So this is, it's hypocrisy at its best, if nothing else. Let's look at another thing which is actually put out, and we hear it a lot before anything major happens from the West. For example, right now there is something which is happening in Serbia, right? Serbia is a Russian ally. Kosovo is a breakaway region that the West actually broke away from Serbia by doing a bombing campaign in the 90s. Now there are, I think, 3 or 4 countries in the entire world that recognize Kosovo as an independent nation. But today, Kosovo has been issued a warning by NATO countries that if you don't cease, sorry, Serbia has been issued a warning by NATO countries to follow the rules based international order, which is what I am going to talk about next. This particular thing is the garb under which morality, human rights, religious freedoms, I don't know if there are any other things that I have missed out. Please let me know so that I can add it over here. Uh, this is what is packaged in this particular thing. Now, who signed this rules-based international order? This is something that came out post the Cold War, by the way, by the unipolar moment that the US had for itself, right? So, rules-based international order was forgotten when the war in Iraq was started. Now, interestingly, I will also say the war in Afghanistan. Why? Because none of those chaps are Afghans. They were Saudis trained in Pakistan, went to Sudan. What did Afghanistan have to do? Yeah, they were keeping Osama bin Laden Fair enough, you could have just bombed them, gotten out. Why do you stay there for 20 years? Because they wanted to build a democracy in Afghanistan, nation building, right? Nobody knows. We are all at the end of it. The foreign minister, I remember, of the EU who had said, or Germany, who had said that, uh, Europe is the garden and the rest of the world is a jungle. So we're all junglies, by the way. Let me just clarify that, as per certain few in the West. It irks me a little bit because these are the guys who go back and say whatever they have to when they come to India and all hushy mushy and all that stuff. Because at the end of it, they know they can't ignore India anymore. It is time for India to start calling these guys out, and that is very, very important. As a post-colonialist India, we must be aware of the impact of colonialism. Colonialism in its form, in its true sense, was physical colonialism, where a Western force would dominate you within your country with military power and so on and so forth, and keep a control over you. Today, it is not that. Guys, today, and I started my discussion with this, is a battle of narratives. Narratives are a game of the mind. When people play these mind games, it is colonialism through controlling the way you think. Now, how do I say this? Look at the way the Europeans today have been colonialized by a collective West. The idea of a collective West, by the way, which consists of certain Europeans. Europeans have been made to do certain things which are detrimental to their own existence. Deindustrialization of Germany. People are coming home in body bags. Don't tell me Poland does not receive people in body bags after the amounts of people that are fighting in Ukraine today. Don't tell me Americans have not had body bags. There are enough and more examples available with photographs. Don't tell me Brits have not come back down in body bags. This is the cost that the people are paying because of this particular narrative. That's how strong this thing is. It can make you believe a certain thing. One of the things, as a lot of people used to say when we were young, that 100 बारी झूठ बोलो तो सच्चा हो जाता है. लोग विश्वास करना शुरू कर देते हैं कि ये सच है. So you keep on repeating same thing again and again, and you will find that people will believe that it's the truth. I want to ask the West. Today it actually fires off, and I'm no fan of China. Before I get into this, I want to say that very clearly. Those of you who follow this channel, you will know how big a fan of China I am. But anyways, people today give tell us, how bad China is, authoritarian regime, this and that and the other, Mao Zedong and the Stalin of China, and all sorts of memes and games are made across. Statements about Chinese not this, Chinese are not that, and this and that and the other. I'm not defending China, but I want to ask this to the West: that where were you when Mao Zedong actually, you know, uh, conducted these cultural revolutions and the other purges and so on and so forth that happened within China? Where was the West? Did they ignore the Tiananmen massacre? Today, you got a candlelight brigade in the West lighting up candles and walking around and saying, "Oh, that was a bad thing. That was a bad thing. That was a bad thing." It's you guys, and if you guys remember the talk with General Shankar, China has had an aided growth. Who aided it? It was the West. So where were all these guys when they kind of just ignored it for their own perspective or for a certain buck that went into their own pocket? To come to a certain close, I want to just say that morality is today and in the future is going to be used as a gauge of international acceptance for a country. They tried doing that to us. You will not be invited to the G7. No, 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 this is not okay. You are this, you are that. Religious freedoms. What hunger index, huh? Bangladesh and one other country, I think Sri Lanka, was above us in the hunger index, but both of those countries, we are supplying them food. Now that's irony. Died 1,000 deaths before someone actually wrote that. But anyways, we are aware of all these things. But please understand, these kind of things make a difference. We kind of brush it off, but they make a difference on the world stage. For a guy who doesn't know the reality of this narrative war, he picks up this report and says, "Oh my God, people are really hungry in India." Little realizing this is a whole narrative war which is being played out. So morality is going to be very, very interesting, and we will be hearing this term kind of repackaged and reset in a lot of different ways. Uh, We need to be aware of this. We will be uh, tell us they will tell us, we are fighting moral wars to defeat authoritarianism. Exactly what they said when they went into Iraq. I mean, Iraq, whatever said and done, there were problems within Iraq with regards to Saddam. Fair enough, point taken. What is happening right now? Your stated objective with regards Assad in Syria, and I'm not his fan again, is to remove him. Who are you to decide that? There are certain places. Why are we trying to sell freedom and democracy everywhere? There obviously are certain countries that don't believe in that particular game. For example, China. You played with it for so many years, now you don't like him, so you want to take it down. What did the West try and do with us? Get into a military alliance against China. Why should I fight your war in Taiwan? Would the Taiwanese come here and fight in my hills here? No. Will you? No. But when it's Ukraine, let me not say, you know what I mean? When it's Ukraine, the entire Western world will get together and say it's the fight of the righteousness. Right? Morality will be set as a gauge according to Western values. Where did we agree to follow Western values? We have our own values. We are a civilizational culture. We've been around for 10, 20, 30, I don't know how many thousands of years. How long? How old is the West? 1776 for the Americans, probably 1,000 or 2,000 years for the Brits. What else? These are civilizational cultures. Nobody's bothered to learn about our civilization and try and find out what is India all about. So, and how can we deal with it? It is about, no, you need to follow this structure, you need to follow this order, you need to follow everything the way we are kind of doing it. That's it. That's the way to do it. Right? The sheer drive to be the top dog, and I'm going to say this very clearly, in the game has led to the West kind of ignoring the basics. And the reason is nothing but the sheer confidence of holding the entire economic order in their hands. Look at what they tried to do to Russia. Again, no fan of Russia or no great supporter of Russia. But when you see that happening to a country where a group of nations decided to sanction Russia, not as a government, but sanction the people, stated objectives. We want to weaken Russia. When you weaken a nation, doesn't that, uh, you know, weaken its people? It's terrible. The whole idea is, it is very, very inexplicable that you're trying to actually hit across a country by targeting its people. What stops them from doing it to us tomorrow? I don't know. Nothing. We need to understand that we stand alone in this world. We don't stand with anyone. When it is a matter of our survival, we will have to fight it alone. We are alone in the borders against China. We are alone in the borders against Pakistan, who's been continuously given money by the same West. These are things India must understand. Instead of bickering and crying about little things that happen within our country, we need to look at and protect ourselves about from these kind of stuff which happens from the West. We are least bothered in India about the narrative that gets played out against us. And we need to understand how to fight it. We know who the narrative creators are. We need to understand how to create our own narrative, the right narrative. And that's all I wanted to say. I think I got a little dragged on in the middle, and I kind of wanted to emphasize on certain things. As I said, Gaurav, thank you so much for joining in. Yash, thank you so much for joining in. I'll start taking questions. Mr. Shankar, you said CNN did not post. Yeah, Hardeep Singh Puri's interview. There was just some clip shown because he gave it back, and that's how it is. And let me also show you, these Western media companies wouldn't have shown across Minister Jaishankar's talks as well. It wouldn't have happened. It just wouldn't have happened. Right? Shankar sir, thank you so much for your contribution. Mr. Naveen, thank you so much for your contribution. A slightly controversial question. Interesting. Would you tie this neo-colonialism to back to white supremacy. Ukraine becomes so big because white men were being killed. And what about US, Iraq, Afghanistan, etc.? I said this, sir. Why are Ukrainian refugees being welcomed with open arms when people from all other parts of the world, and incidentally running from wars that were started by the West? Who started the Syrian war? Who started the war in Iraq? Who left Afghanistan the way that you did? If you wanted to get somebody and get out. What is this thing about building a nation? Did you really think Afghanistan would actually come up to be the next United States in this region? Of course, that was not the idea. The idea was to occupy, the idea was to hold ground within this place. It didn't really matter what happened to the place that you were occupying. Look at what happened in South during the Vietnam War. Look at what the Americans did to their own Japanese American citizens during the Second World War. Yes, they have apologized for it, but that's what exactly happened. So, yes, I would agree with you, sir. And this is a part of a thought process which is not left the West, right? They might have covered it up. It is not left the West. Let's move forward. Thank you so much for your contribution once again. What is a nation's morality if not putting interests of his own citizens at the center? On that account, India seems to be doing okay for 1.3 billion people. So today, because we've got a little intrinsic strength to stand up on our own self and say no. If this would have happened some time ago, there would have been quite a lot of issues with regards to putting our own perspective across. And I think all of us would agree. It's 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 a sad state of affairs, and we are accepting this as the world rules-based international order. Wonder whose rules, who's international, and who's the order. Russian energy is not sanctioned per se. They realized they could not enforce it or end up sanctioning half the world. Well, sir, they try to. They indeed did try to. There's no question about it. There are no morals in geopolitics. The liberals, however, beg to differ on that. Well, I'd like to ensure that there are certain morals, and India is a moral country. We are not involved in this war. It does not affect us. It does not, when the French say that we don't want to get into China, and that's what Macron said, we don't want to be against China because it does not border us. The same way Ukraine does not border us. Why should we get involved? Learn about it, know about it. Beyond that, no. That's it. Mersheimer explains the West does employ realism in its relations but puts a velvet glove on to human rights and etc. And it's ideological and something that the Democrats are big on. We see how it affected their relations with the Saudis. Yeah, well, you know what? You called someone a pariah and said that you will make sure that this country is left behind in the annals of history, and suddenly go and begging him to increase the oil inputs. Now, a lot of us would actually wonder what are these kind of weapons that India has. India also has certain weapons. The tech, we've got medicines, and a whole lot of other things that India is very, very strong at. You can imagine if this becomes something, we've also got certain weapons. But why get it to a point? That's my whole question. If countries would recognize each other's interests and actually work towards coming to a common ground, which is exactly what did not happen during Ukraine, you won't have disputes. And instead of the entire world trying to egg on Ukraine to fight Russia, resulting in its own destruction, somebody should have sat down and said, guys, please stop. I think India and a few countries are adamant that this is what needs to be done. Beyond that, nothing. It's all, oh, we will destroy Russia, we will dismember Russia. The Russian supporters say, oh, Ukraine needs to be destroyed, this, that, and the other. At the end of it, look at the baseline. One of the two countries are going to get destroyed, and we know which one is going to be. It's half destroyed as it is. So let's see. What are the real rules based world order? Didn't countries always change and follow rules as part of their own understanding and interests? Apparently not, sir. The West does not accept it. The West says, bhai, you need to follow to our line. You know, I'd like to take you back to that dialogue that Ursula von der Leyen had said that if people don't follow what we want them to do, we have our ways. You can please Google this. This is there, it was said in context of Germany, right? We need to distinguish between world media and world governments. I think the latter has got the point loud and clear. Their media, as usual, is up into their tricks. We see this even in their own leaders. Sir, let me say this, this idea of free Western press is a misnomer. A lot of this stuff gets governed by a certain place. A lot of the narrative and the opinion pieces we see come across from the IW section. If you officially see, US has a, I think, a budget of about 8 or 10 billion dollars with regards to information warfare. No, not 8 or 10. I think about seven. Yeah, 8 or 10 billion dollars with regards to information warfare, and this is mentioned. This is the Department of Defense. Each department has its own information warfare segment. The kind of leaks that we've seen and this and that, the other, it's quite interesting. And so, yeah, they are free to an extent, but they are supposed to follow a certain editorial guideline. The Western world's sense of supremacism is is over us is centuries old. It will only end when we take our rightful place as a technological economic superpower equal to the US, EU, China, are three real competitors. Yes, absolutely, you need to take the place in your own world, and we need to be confident of ourselves. Again, we sat down and discussed this with General Shankar. The biggest people who criticize us is us. I think we have a right to do that, but at the end of it, we also need to look at the positives. So, the rules based order is under challenge. Bandar, yeah, that's something which is interestingly coming out during this war, that we are challenging a lot of things which is here, and we've been able to create a certain space. And mind you, slow and steady, you will find certain countries who will stand behind us and say, yeah, these guys are talking sense, let me just align myself with that. Although we might not want to create a group, but this will happen. The West can't squat, that's why they tried, can't squat, that's why they try to guilt trip. The FM has dealt with it brilliantly, absolutely. But I want to actually take on the last two words you've written: numerous occasion. Why do the same media outlets need to ask him the same question everywhere he goes? Technological, economic, military superpower equal to EU, US, China, 21st century should be a natural goal. We just discussed that. Absolutely. Agree. We buy 20% of Russia on oil, which means we are not buying from someone else. Yeah, sir, 20, 40, whatever, 10% even. India's consumption on an average is about 4 to 5 million barrels a day. Who will give that? I mean, Sumit Peer mentioned these figures. We save 150 million barrels, yeah, $4.3 billion a month and $50 billion a year for oil. Add coal to the mix and works out to 100 billion a year saved. It's major. Sir, please add fertilizers. Please add wax and paraffin and stuff like that. Interestingly, one thing that just came to my mind when you actually said this is the fact that when we actually refine oil for someone else, remember there's a lot of oil residue that left behind, gets left behind, wax and paraffin and all that stuff. That we sell again. So we're making money on top of money. Good for us. Let them keep sanctioning Russian oil for all I care. Uh, isn't this not appointing an ambassador to India a message to India in itself? Let there be a message, sir. My question is, they did appoint some lady, I forget her name, but see, please understand, this is how it is. When Indians created a ruckus, the next day they put out of this thing and said, oh, no, no, this person has been appointed. But nothing. Message means what? You still have to deal with us. You can keep messaging us. But till the time we are here and we are standing and we are growing, you still have to deal with us. This is the assertiveness I think Minister Jaishankar has shown, which is very, 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 very good. Switzerland is not neutral. Its protection is allowing. Yeah, of course. Who will attack it? Mantha, that's a good point. But see, this is how they are. They want to kind of hold the black money of the world. I mean, who holds Vijay Mallya and Nirav Modi and this and that and the other? UK. Why? You think if India held one of these chaps who's stolen money from the UK, things would be this quiet? No. right? Okay. Autocratic democracy is the code. They don't listen to us. Yeah, well, they'll call you autocratic democracy. What else was it? Freedom of religion, um, what health, what hunger index. Remember that stuff about COVID and our vaccines. India will never be able to vaccinate its population. This, that, and the other. Whole lot of bump was actually said, but what actually happened? Naveen sir, thank you so much with for the contribution. What is a nature's morality if not putting the interests of its own citizens? I think, sorry, this comment I've taken, but oh yeah, this was another thing. I'm so sorry. My mistake. Adi, don't you think it's high time India also has an Al Jazeera? Sir, there is no question. We need to have our own narrative, which we sadly don't. Sadly don't. And this is something that I actually wonder why we don't do this. We expect the foreign minister to sit down and just keep on doling around the gyan. What beyond Jay Shankar? He's not going to be around for the rest of the world, rest of our lives. What beyond that? We have to have an international press media which creates a certain narrative. Yes, we've been able to put down Pakistan pretty well. It's an easy shot. We have to fight China. So there, I absolutely agree with you. This is something which is required. This is the root of Western bias towards us Indians. We are looked down as the whitewashing of our rich culture is well done. Autocratic democracy is an oxymoron, ma'am. Beyond that, I mean, they when they say autocratic democracy, are they calling 60 or I don't know how many percent of the people voted for this particular government fools? That's the question I'd like to ask. Where has then been a protest or an attack on the Indian establishment where the people said this entire election has been rigged? People blame it on Trump, but there were so many people who believed that. Many NGOs, many of those NGOs are funded from Nordic countries, especially Norway, Sweden. Absolutely correct. UK, big one. And this is how this game works. It's amazing. There are few papers I've read about this game. If you guys want, just let me know. Anybody wants, please connect with me. I'll send them to you. They open your eyes with regards to these kind of activities the West conducts. I was wondering whether the government brought an extra requirement of 2015 for NGOs. A few years later, I understood because it was of what happened in Ukraine. They saw how a government can be toppled. Sir, look at what every government is doing today. Amnesty International, right? I just take you back to the time when they put out a report that Ukrainians were using citizens as human shields. The entire top three level of Amnesty Europe has had to resign and say, no, 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 that was our perception. We are sorry. And they withdrew that report. Congratulations for him, sir. Congratulations for him. We don't need to worry about Washington Post. Their subscription went down the hill. Lol. Most of the people waking up to the propaganda, these mechanisms will dismantle themselves. Yeah, of course, lies can never stand. It can never ever stand. It will not happen, right? You will not be able to actually sustain a lie for that long. Unfortunately, today this lie has gone on for a long time and they're finding it difficult to sell it anymore. You're right, but we still need to be careful, right? If it's not Washington Post, they'll pay one of your guys to write articles, which is what we've seen. Correct me if I'm wrong. Ma'am, please connect with me in my email address. I'll be glad to tell you about myself. Jungles are self-sustaining, gardens are not. Well, sir, I travel to the EU and please tell them because they think they are the gardens of the world with the petunias and the tulips. I don't want to quote GOT here, but Tryon said correctly. Power lies where men believes it resides. If people think the power lies in the West, we will prove them wrong from our actions. I think that particular thing is already started, and I hope it comes to a point where we can actually stand up and say stop. That'll be more aggressive, but I'm sure all of us would want to see that. It'll never happen, but all of us would want to see that someday. Poles are actually more excited about this Ukraine war, so they went in on their own. Well, not the Poles, a certain amount of the people. Trust me, there are protests in Poland that are not being covered, right? More Poles have died in Ukraine war than our total casualties in the Kargil war. They say about 1,000 of these Poles are gone. So I mean, God rest their souls in peace. But uh, you know, it's sad. Argentina above India in university education index, sir. Pakistan is above India, sir. India तो बड़ा useless country. क्या करें, sir? इंडिया में तो साहब एजुकेशन कहाँ वेयर कहाँ सर it's only west where there's education. All of us need to just leave everything that we are doing and go to Stanford and Oxford to get our brains checked. That's what the idea is, anybody. And this is something that I'm sure while growing up a lot of us have heard. Oh, Ivy League se pad ke aaya yaar, bada smart hoga. We know what smartness is coming out from there and how they actually twist the entire thing to their own advantage, right? What did Germany say about inviting us at the G7? They this was a report that was put out that they might not invite India for the G7. So yeah, dekh lo, we will exclude you. That's the thing, because the West holds the key of the international economic order, the SWIFT, the this and that and the other. So they can threaten us, and that's very very uh, this thing very very important. Ukraine is above India in press freedom index, sir. Ukraine is a very developed culture, democracy. I mean, we are what to do here. Sorry, I'm just when I hear this nonsense, there's something I can't really bear with regards to uh, the whole lies that are put across. I mean, I can't be anything apart from sarcastic. Parth, you're saying bring Mr. Vikram Sood. I will indeed try my luck. Mr. Tilak Deveshwar will be joining in on to us, and I'm announcing this right here on Sunday, the 1st of January, in the afternoon to discuss the biggest fault line in Pakistan, the Pashtuns. So we will have that on Sunday, 1st of January, the new year. I know, so I'm going to get him down and we're going to have this fantastic discussion. Parth, you also say India is alone. Absolutely, I just said. India is alone. Got good rapport with France, Israel. Sir, rapport we should have good with everyone. But remember, you can have great relations with everyone, but your battles you need to fight. No one else. No one will come down. Let's please understand. Ukraine is being bombed to the dust. Yeah, these mercenaries are going fighting there. Tell me one country who wants to actually go in with their troops. No one. We think Poland is very, very this thing and that thing. No ways. When you tell them to just start their tanks and go inside Ukraine, they will not go. They won't. Right? So it's 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 interesting. Right? You also say that a narrative is built against India by Western woke press. Yeah, wokeism. I find, you know, it's like it's quite. You know, I don't know if it's air to air transmission or what, but wokeism is quite a disease. We need to understand that. Right? As soon as the Russia-Ukraine war started, YouTube simply deleted many Russian channels like RT. Some Russians were saying their hard work on YouTube, even years of 10 plus years, just got deleted overnight. Yeah, it's sad, right? You can absolutely imagine. Major General Narayan will be with us on Thursday. Right, coming towards the close of this interview, I'm going to just run through the rest of the comments. Thanks so much, guys, for being so participative in this discussion. Yesterday, PM Modi's mother was rushed to the hospital. His brother was in a car crash. Don't you find it suspicious that his family members are targeted in the same day? So honestly, I know about these two. I haven't put my mind to it. I haven't kind of put clubbed them together. Now that you've kind of put it like that, it does seem a bit weird. But let me come back to you on this. Let me come back to you on this. Parth, you say Raw is poor in narrative warfare. Well, it's not Raw that needs to fight a narrative warfare. If Raw starts doing that, they'll get exposed. So they don't. There is a information warfare has to be a separate department altogether within the armed forces, within the structure of the government, within the foreign office, and so on and so forth. It has to be done. India is quietly shifting away from dollar transactions. It's a big thing for the West. Well, we need to also be careful. The last couple of guys that tried that, we know what happened to them. So let's be very, very careful. Nice presentation. Thank you. Uh, India's political strength and stability defiles a rightful place in this decade. Very important point. We are stable today. Look at Pakistan. Nobody will take it seriously. Look at UK. Who will take it seriously? You don't know if Rishi Sunak is going to be here. So yeah, stability within a country is very, very important. UK funded BBC is a free press, but China funded our propaganda. West hypocrisy is everywhere. Ma'am, I call it the British BS channel. So I don't want to say the whole word, but that I have been kind of saying this since I was yay small, and I used to look at that. I used to find them to be ridiculous because every time they showed India, it was this poor kid on the street and some beggar or some guy, beaning that, and the snake dancing or the Taj Mahal, and that's it. That was India. uh, I didn't like that right from when I was a child, and I kind of have a prejudice against it. I think India is on the right path. We need another 20 years before we can start landing hard punches on the international stage. I'd kind of bring back the timeline. The punches have already started. If you look at what Minister Jaishankar has been saying, the punches have been raw. But yeah, I'd agree with you. We need to strengthen ourselves internally for the next some time. There is no question. FOE, free speech, human rights, minority rights, environmental activism become tools of colonialized minds of target countries. Untime, ultimately for regime change with protests and color revolutions. That's very interesting that you actually elucidate like that, Ashish. Should we call EU as a democratic autocracy as it's a vassal of USA? Ma'am, I don't think the EU, or sorry, sir, I don't think the EU is actually a vassal. I think EU, it's not the EU that's a vassal, it's the leaders of the EU which is a vassal. You please see the protests which are happening in those countries. It's crazy. People don't want to be a part of NATO. They don't want to fight this war. They don't want to do all this stuff. It's terrible that what we see happening in front of us. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. I've just not been that well. So you know, we should start using Newton's third law, giving back the sum of what they throw at us. Indeed, but the balanced approach that India has had till now, it is something that has been appreciated by a large number of nations in the world. And excuse me, uh, I think that is the right part to be. We need to be balanced in our approach, look mature and not overly blah about our comments. I think what is being done is pretty good. But of course, I want to take us back to a comment which said that we need to have our own narrative machine within India, right? Non-Western countries have started moving away from all these Western financial structures slowly. The effect will start showing. China and Japan have dumped 400 billion of treasury bond in the last 6 months. So China used to own about 3 trillion of American debt at one time. Today they own about 900 or 890 or something like that. I might be mistaken, but it's below $1 trillion. So yeah, what you're saying is absolutely right. What is the role of missionaries in anti-India propaganda? Ex Stan Swami, what kind of name is this? Sir, the role is about controlling a society. They care a damn about these religions. Trust me, and that's what I keep. I get very irritated when people get hard bent on this religion part of it. Because please understand, it's not the religion that they're bothered about. You think these guys are really bothered about making India Christian or whatever said and done? No. The idea is to control a society, get your narrative right down to the grassroots so that you're able to control it from within. India is a growing country. Remember, if you have that kind of control within a society at the bottom, we look at symptoms. We're not looking at the disease. Even in the WhatsApp group, we keep talking about this over and over and over and over and over and over and over again without realizing that we are just talking about the symptoms with no discussion of the disease. The disease is that we have to strengthen ourselves from the within. We have to figure out that this is what is happening. It's not because of some guy wants to build this or that or the other. No, they want to control you. And that's the main thing that we need to understand. Don't you think Sindh is also a big fault line of KPK? If you think Singh Bottomistan will be a landlocked country, Gaurav, join us on the first. I'd love to answer that question for you. What about Taliban's new world map they have released? Pakistan, JNK, and part of Rajasthan, Gujarat were in Afghan territory, and AP is part of China. What's this poop? Sir, I don't think they know where their nose is. Let them, I. See, I'll tell you one thing about Afghanistan. There are lots of powers within the place. If you think that the Americans have left Afghanistan, it's a sad mistake. If you think that there are Pakistanis are getting beaten up by Afghanistan, but they don't have still have certain control, we are sadly mistaken. There is a lot of gameplay in Pakistan which will be done. There's a lot of money flowing, and they need money right now. So anybody who's going to pay them money, they will be saab bolo saab. Simple as that. That's how it is. I don't think we should pay too much attention to all this stuff because remember, a lot of this stuff is done to antagonize us. And if we do get antagonized, we should just protest and be done with it. Right? And of course, find a way to respond to that particular thing in the time and place of our own choosing. Responding immediately, आराम से ठहर जाओ. There's a saying na, ठहर जा गदाधारी भीम ठहर जा. We need to wait. We need to kind of get to a point where we know when we respond the impact should be the maximum. Just giving out a response will not really help us in any way. Impact is what we are looking for, right? That's my, of course, that's the way I think. I may be right, I may be wrong. That's my opinion. So, right, great work, thank you so much. uh Pratim, you say that we need definitely read experts discussion on Nepal, Myanmar, and Bangladesh coming up in the next year. Yes, sir, I will. General Shokeen, yes, I'm going to do this with him. And do watch Harsha Bhogle's interview with the great cricket. It was more about India's past and morality than cricket. Yeah, of course, I saw that. And interestingly, that's what I'm talking about. This is how the whole game is sold. Of course, it's very difficult. We need for us to understand in just one session of an hour that we sat down. There are so many things that happen around us, which until we piece together, the picture will not come out. That's all I have to say, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. It is I think I've done this live for after a couple of days. I was not keeping too well and a little busy with regards to my work. It's the time of also some stuff that happens, but I want to be thank you, Pinaki, thank you so much for this this thing. And I'll try my level best of keep bringing you nice new sessions all the time. uh Hats off to your dedication. Thank you so much, Mr. Vijay. And you said won't giving them wheat and medicines post this map mean something? No, it doesn't. Let me tell you this. And if you wanted to, I wanted to end this, but it doesn't actually. The reason is because you're giving the meat not to these idiots, you're giving it to the population. In And that's where our soft power reaches. These are games that you play over time. Remember that. you know uh, you have to control a certain pop. Do you Okay, let me just give you a small example. A lot of us say, what will Chinese know about India? Do you know Indian medicines are of the in the highest demand in China? Please Google it. There were a shipment right now that was caught in the port of Hong Kong with antiviral medication, I think about 1 or 2 days ago. I think I shared this on our Telegram as well as the WhatsApp group. um yeah, 1 or 2 days ago, they caught this shipment of antiviral drugs. People know. People know where what is happening. There is this Taliban thing. Taliban may or may not be there forever. But people know. And Taliban is not going to go against his entire people. Yeah, he will stop education for women. He'll do this, that, and the other. But in certain things, they also know which side of the grass is green, yeah. So let's not think that they are jungle men, they're stupid. They're not. They've been running that country for a year and a half now. So something is there in that place. I'm not saying they're great sheikhs, great leaders and stuff like that, but we need to manage it. What good is it for us to fight with the Taliban on the world stage? Nothing. You're reducing your level. If you need to protest the Taliban, you do it to them and you tell them very clearly, you do this again, your people are going to go hungry, right? So just stop it. Could be done. So there are ways and means, and I'm sure India is pretty smart in handling this entire thing. Cheers, Adi. Thank you so much. Thanks great session. Been listening to you from some time now. Adiji, put in your great effort. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, guys. Before I sign off, although I'm sure a lot of people are partying and stuff like that in the coming close to the new year. Not many people were there, but that's fine. I'm sure a lot of people will watch it in over time. Thank you all for actually bringing my my number to. I'm closing into 8,000 followers, and my next one would be 10,000, and that's something that is a target that I've set for myself. So please help me grow to that point. Tell your friends to subscribe, and please check out the videos. There's some interesting stuff which has been collected over the years. Thank you so much. Like this video, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Yes, if you can, please do help out the Dev Talks efforts. Check out my website, thedevtalks.com, and today's talk will be also put out in form of an article which will be there on my website by tomorrow afternoon. Till then, guys, namaskar and Jai Hind.